Hello everyone, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rachel, I'm a writer, and I've made this video to give a brief commentary on the short stories that I've uploaded in this playlist. I'm not going to do what I do with my poem by poem videos. With my poem by poem videos I go into a lot of depth about what each poem is about, and the reason why I do that is because it's part of a whole collection and the collections were sentimental and they did mean a lot. It's not that these stories don't mean anything to me, like of course they do, and I uploaded them because I've written heaps of stories before, but these stories are the only real stories that I've written for something and as a part of something. A bit of background on these short stories. I studied creative writing and journalism at the University of Wollongong, and I actually wrote these stories as part of a subject I was taking, RIT 212, Writing Prose Fiction 200, and it focused on microfiction and short stories. And it wasn't exactly an assessment task, but I don't know if it was part of a participation mark, but my lecturer would get myself and everyone in the class to write a short story below 500 words, maybe 400 words. I think it was about 500 words max, just so we could get feedback on it. And I actually liked doing it. I loved going to class and getting feedback and talking about it, and I loved giving feedback to other people on their stories as well. In this playlist, and the playlist of stories is actually the amount of short stories I have on my computer from this class, which I took from late February 2011 until the end of session, I think was early June 2011, so almost 3 years ago, 3 years ago now. I've got 8 stories here, and there's 13 weeks in this session. In week 1 of session, there's never tutorials, and we did this in tutorials. I don't think we did this in the last week of session either, and the other 3 times I didn't because it wasn't for an assessment. We didn't necessarily have to do it every week, although we did it every week anyway, because that's what we were told to do. And the other 3 weeks, with the exception of weeks 1 and 13, the other 3 weeks I do vaguely remember one particular week where I just couldn't come up with a short story. I just got caught up with other things and I just couldn't do it. And I think that's probably what would have happened with the other 3 weeks where I didn't come up with anything. I'm going to briefly talk about these short stories. Some of them are significant, some of them aren't. The story I wrote in week 2, Looking In, it is about where I would be on a bus going into town, because I mentioned in another story I lived at Campus East, which isn't in the centre of Wollongong. I don't live there anymore, but it was in the centre, it was in a suburb in Wollongong, and if I wanted to go downtown to Crown Street Mall, I'd have to catch a bus, and the bus would go in a certain direction, as they do. And I'd go by this apartment block, and I looked up one day and I see that there's this room. I don't see inside the whole room, but I saw that there was gym equipment, and then there was a canvas right in front of the window with a set of paintbrushes. And in that particular year, and I think every now and again, I think there's still a canvas in that room, I'd thought to myself, oh, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. There's a canvas in a bedroom, and I thought, clearly this person's an artist. Whether they're professional or amateur, I don't know, but it just stuck out to me because it was the one thing that was in front of the window. That's the first thing you saw when you looked in the window, and I just wondered what this person's story was. And it also was about the fact that I would look into people's flats or houses when I was on the bus and look at what I saw, and I would question people's choices in terms of decor and furniture, and I wondered how they lived, and what kind of jobs they had and what kind of lives they led. And I think you can tell a lot about a person's life by the way that they live, especially within their houses or their flat. The story I wrote in week 3, Forbidden Embrace, was about a story in the Illawarra Mercury. I think it was there was Fig Tree High School. There was a hugging ban imposed don't know if posed is the right word, but forced upon the students of Fig Tree High School. Like, they weren't allowed to hug each other anymore, and more these days there are these news stories about schools banning certain things or stopping their students from doing certain things. In this particular case, it was hugs. Other cases of it have been like cartwheels, competitive games, handstands, all sorts of things. And I found it so bizarre, and I just wrote a story about it, and wrote a story about like students reacting to it. Like, you've got the narrator who's kind of doesn't agree with it, but she doesn't really want to do anything about it, and then you've got the friend who I thought was quite hilarious, Kelly. You know, she's the school captain, and you know, she's a really smart girl. Like, she's a smart girl and she's the school captain, but yet she loves aggravating the teachers, and that's kind of what I liked about her. Like, yes, she's very high up in the student hierarchy if she's like straight A and the captain, but yet I just found it really fascinating that she tried to stir the teachers and tried to cause trouble. You know, I just love that idea. The story I wrote in week 4 called Victims was a very interesting one. I love the show Law and Order SVU, and if you actually listen to both Victims and Victims Part 2, it clearly is an American setting. I chose American because, you know, I watch Law and Order, and some story ideas I've done for other subjects have come out of Law and Order SVU, and just like for the court system, and I thought it would be a really exciting story to have the American court system in there. Not that the Australian one's boring, but the Australian one's a little different, and the American one is the most common one that you see. And there was this ambiguity about whether this person in the story is innocent or not, and my class really, like, this story was analysed for feedback. Looking In and Forbidden Embrace weren't analysed for feedback. Victims was the first story I did that was analysed in the class, and they loved the title because it's talking about a situation where you've got someone who has died in this situation and someone who's in court, and then she's apparently been bullied, but yet with the ending you're not really sure if she really is a victim. And they love the ambiguity of the ending, like, was she bullied, was it an accident? And even with Part 2 I never really make that quite clear. Bundle of Joy, there wasn't really a big backstory with writing Bundle of Joy. I think it was an idea that came in my head about this woman who, like, has become a mother and she's struggling with becoming a parent. And parents, I'm not a parent myself, but from what I've heard and what I can imagine, that, you know, parenthood is wonderful, but like anything else, it's not perfect, and especially if it's your first child or just in the early stages after the child's been born, it would be a struggle. And I like this idea. Actually, it's not true that it didn't have a backstory. I was inspired by a Sex and the City episode where Miranda was having trouble with her son Brady when he was a baby, and Miranda felt like she was a bad mother, and she sees all the other women in the building who are mothers who think they're judging her and staring at her, and they don't say anything to her. And one particular mother complains about Brady's crying, and Miranda realises that this woman is a mother, and this particular woman later offers to help her, and it like reassures her that she's not a bad mother. But I just like this idea of this woman kind of being in bliss and living a blissful life and in her dream, and starting and ending with the dream, and contrasting that with the kind of reality of her life at the moment. Week 6, the day when the most unexpected thing happened. That particular story I wrote about the death of my good friend George Matchett. He was a fellow uni student. He lived with me at Campus East. He lived 3 doors down from me. He was one of the first people I met when I moved to Wollongong. I think I actually met him on my first day. And he went surfing with friends. He got caught in a rip and he drowned. And it was March 23rd, and it was about week 4 or 5 of the session. And I wrote this because his death was all that was on my mind. You know, it was on my mind. It was everyone on Campus East's mind. It was in the university. It was very big in the university community, his death, because not many students die during their university experiences. It's probably only a small handful. So it's and And because I was dealing with that grief, this short story that I submitted, it was pretty much about my day and about what happened. And it wasn't analysed in the workshop, but I think I was never entirely sure whether my lecturer read every single story that we all submitted, because there was a lot of us in the class. Because not everyone's story was analysed in the class. She'd pick like maybe 6 people's work to analyse. But she did ask me if I was okay the next, because I think we'd email them to her or something like that. I think we used to email them to her and then we'd bring printed copies to class or something. And I think she actually read it because she asked me if I was okay, but she didn't say anything else. So this was a day-by-day thing, and I start like in the story where he's like 9:15 a.m, which according to the newspaper report was when he was pronounced dead. And then I just go through my day, and at the very end, and this was confusing, I think, when I did talk about it in class, but it wasn't during the feedback session. I go back to 1:14 p.m. and it was the minute before I was told, and but I didn't mention that in the original piece. So I kind of went through my day by day, finding out, and then at the end going backwards to before I found out, because I talk about ignorance is bliss. This class was actually a Wednesday class. Sorry for the coughing. I had this class on the day that he died, and then in the next week I handed in this story, and his funeral was the next Thursday, so I handed this story in, or like either Tuesday or Wednesday, and then I went to his funeral. And I have talked about him a lot in my work since then. Like I've written some poetry about him, and I've written, like in my autobiographical work, like columns and stuff that I do, I've written about him as well. And I've talked about his parents, and I still miss him. It's been nearly 3 years since his death. We're approaching the 3-year mark, and I on the 23rd, like obviously in this story, which will be in 8 days from now, it'll be the 3rd anniversary. Envy I think is quite a humorous one. Envy is about the nightclub experience, and I think I can count on one hand in my lifetime the amount of times I've been out to a nightclub. I really don't like the atmosphere, and it's a combination. It is about that nightclub atmosphere, it is about the part of the uni culture of getting drunk and going out and trying to pick up every week, and also my feelings towards nightclubbing, as well as my feelings towards men who are in those nightclubs trying to hit on women, and my feelings towards dating and relationships in general, and how this character Kiara kind of tortures herself because she loves her friend and wants to spend time with her friend, but her friend keeps going through this cycle of saying it's a girls' night out, picking up a guy, taking him back to her place, he leaves, she does it all again. And it's about this girl breaking the cycle, and you think that she's going to meet someone of her own, and she could have chatted to him, but she just chose to live her life on her own terms and just go home. This was analysed in the workshop in class, and some people didn't think it was really believable, but I felt that this girl, like, yes, she could have talked to this guy and she could have started this cycle similar to her friend Nora, but she actively, consciously decides not to. She decides to be different than the rest of the nightclub culture. Countdown is an interesting one. It's not about George, but his death really did affect me, and like there was a lot, like death was kind of one of the biggest things on my mind. Countdown is about, and I actually used Countdown I think a year later in like a essay I did for my writing theory class, because in 3rd year in writing theory we got to choose what kind of work we did in regards of academic essays and academic papers. Countdown, I use Countdown, there's a narrative theory called narrative desire, where the reader's goal is to reach the end, and there's got to be a desire within the writing to reach the end. Like, I could have that wrong, but that was my grasp of it. And I really personally love that theory, and that's why I chose to do it. And we had to choose a theory to analyse, or 2 theories to analyse, and narrative desire was one of them, and apply it to a piece of our own writing. And I chose Countdown because throughout the story you have this guy pretty much talking about his day like it's any other day, and the reader's made aware of the fact that this man is going to die, but yet he doesn't know that he's going to die. And the narrative's desire in this story is to get to the end to find out how he dies, and that's basically what I talked about. And it was about the fact that for me it was dealing with my feelings with death, and how like one day someone can be around and the next they're not, which is what happened with George. And it was, especially, it talks about unexpected death, and I was just kind of dealing with my feelings of the fact that you don't know when you're going to die with Countdown, and there's kind of internal debate of, because the reader knows he's going to die but the character himself doesn't know he's going to die, so there's that debate of like, would you prefer to know when you're going to die, or would you rather not know? Victims Part 2, like, because Victims was so well received in my class, and because I found it interesting, I did write a second part. It wasn't particularly strong. It wasn't as strong as the first piece. I liked having the ambiguity, I'm really pronouncing that wrong. I liked kind of how I wanted to maintain that her innocence remained ambiguous. I should use ambiguous, not ambiguity, but anyway. I wanted to kind of keep her innocence kind of murky. And the trial had ended, and it's like some time has passed and she's trying to rebuild it. Like, she's dealing with the consequence of her choice, whether it was accidental or not, because whether she's innocent or guilty, there's going to be consequences either way, and her guilt couldn't really be proven by the jury and by the lawyers anyway. Like, there wasn't really, it was hard to tell whether it was intentional, so I didn't go back into a courtroom. And yeah, so I just kind of, with Part 2, she's dealing with the consequences of her choice, really. And like I said, I wanted to leave her innocence. Like, you want to know whether she's innocent or guilty, but to me, like a story, like that kind of story, I think what I was aiming for was that it doesn't really matter whether you're innocent or guilty of something. Either way, there's going to be consequences with choices. I did this with I did this kind of playlist like I did with my poems. It's not a collection of short stories. I don't view it as a collection, but I've written plenty of short stories, but these are the only short stories that I found that were a part of something, and that's why I chose to make YouTube videos with the stories and making this commentary. And I make commentaries and I do poem by poem videos with my poems because I personally love dissecting my work. I love talking about my work, not in a kind of pompous, narcissistic way, but I loved in high school where we dissected the work of other writers for our studies. Like, I like dissecting work, and I like commentaries. You know, I don't listen to every single commentary on every DVD I've got because I have heaps of them, like really like hundreds of them, literally hundreds of them. But I do enjoy listening to the commentary on my Simpsons DVDs. A really great commentary to listen to is Brad Bird's commentary on his movie The Incredibles, because The Incredibles was a really spectacular animated film, and it's interesting because he wrote it as well, and like, I like kind of finding out how, like, the animators and the writers, like with animated film, but just writers in general with other films, how they come up with ideas, and with movies what the experience was like for the actors. But from a writing point of view, it's interesting, especially with The Simpsons, it's interesting how the writers come up with ideas all the time and what a story means. Like with The Simpsons, you think that this is a funny story or a funny episode, and it is, but it usually goes deeper than that. And I think that's why The Simpsons have had such longevity. Like, you've got good like it's the writing is really the foundation and of that longevity. And I like I said, I love talking about my own work, and that's why I wanted to make this video. So that's it for my short commentary on my short stories. Thank you for watching and listening to this commentary, and thank you for watching and listening to my audio short stories. I just want to add to this commentary that with my poem videos, as well as my poem by poem videos with the collections, I'd always have an original artwork for each collection. My third collection, I actually painted something, made a work of art just for the collection, just so it could have a cover art. With my short stories, they're not original cover arts. I like rainbows, I like different colours, and all I did was just make slides in PowerPoint with just different colours. And the reason why the cover art for this commentary video is a rainbow is because I obviously use different colours. My particular order with a rainbow when I do rainbows is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink, usually. I didn't follow this with all my cover arts. With Victims, for example, because they're two different stories, but like they're kind of about the same thing. I kept them yellow, and with Envy, it's the phrase "hold green with envy," and I thought I can't do that slide or that cover art in any other colour. It still had to be green, and so yeah, I just like a rainbow of colours, and I thought since it's a commentary talking about every short story, I went with a rainbow slide. Anyway, that's it for my commentary. I swear that is it for my commentary. Thanks for watching and listening.